I will say on behalf of restaurants now, we have lots of options that are trans fat free if you want to pay the money.
Yeah.
You don't have to go for the cheap stuff.
Well, what happened is in the 1980s, there were FDA reviews that concluded it was safe as can be, and there were only little shreds, little bits of doubt. Then in 1990,
Was that because they didn't have the information, or was
they weren't doing,
or was there a lobbying thing going on?
No, it wasn't
there?
lobbying. It was really the scientific studies hadn't been done yet, and it wasn't until 1990, months after McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's switched from beef tallow to partially hydrogenated oil, Crisco-like stuff, was it discovered to raise the bad cholesterol and lower the good cholesterol.
Yeah.
And then the floodgates opened on the scientific research. Epidemiology studies were done in the 90s at Harvard School of Public Health that concluded that trans fat has probably been causing about 50,000 premature deaths every year. The FDA considers this generally recognized as safe. To this day, it's generally recognized as safe by the FDA.
On what basis?
Inaction.
You mean that the numbers aren't alarming?
No, that it just hasn't. The FDA hasn't wanted to act.
Right.
We petitioned the FDA in 2004 to revoke that generally recognized as safe status,
Right.
and the FDA just sits
And when you
there.
say generally recognized, who's on board with you on this?
Yeah, that's the general scientific. The FDA looks to the general scientific community that makes its decisions on the basis of the scientific research. And in the
Right.
70s and 80s, it was generally recognized as safe. Now it's generally recognized as dangerous, except at the FDA.
Yeah.
Now, privately, they know that it's dangerous, but they just won't act.
Well, do you feel that in an age where communications is getting better and better, that some of this information gets to the public in spite of the FDA, and the public are much more making their own choices based on the vast amount of information that does get to them?
That's right, and the companies are making their decisions on that basis. Now, the FDA has required trans fat labeling on packaged foods because trans fat causes heart disease. You know, the FDA knows it, but they won't get it out of the food supply. So the process has been very slow, with many unnecessary heart attacks.
Why do we know so much about trans fats now? Why is it on our radar in such a great way? Is that something you did, or did you do it with others?
Well, we started this campaign in 1993, first to get labeling, then to get it out of packaged foods and restaurants.
Because the labeling well, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but because the labeling, you prompted that also.
That's right. We petitioned the FDA back in 1994.
Right.
And, but, you know, on a basis of good science. And our strongest ally has been the professor at the Harvard School of Public Health, Walter Willett, who's done much of the epidemiology research and has been very outspoken publicly.
What was the reaction the first time you said there should be labels on food that tell people what the contents are?
The nutrition facts label?
Yeah.
There wasn't much of a buzz about that. You know, it kind of was.
Well, it happened. So how did you make that revolution happen?
We actually started. We were getting legislation in the 1980s.
Right.
On one kind of deception.
Right.
Like
little stuff.
Low in salt and low in salt on a food that's high in cholesterol and so on. And then Henry Waxman had the idea of combining all of these different things into kind of an omnibus food labeling law that was passed in 1990. Nutrition labeling was part of it, along with restrictions on health claims and nutrition claims. And I think
can't imagine a time. I mean, how many of you, all of you, pick up packages and look at the food label first? I mean, I can't imagine a time before food labels.
That's right. I mean, it's hard to believe that we didn't have them, and they're extremely useful. And I think the challenge now is to have more easy to understand labels. I admit that the labels are confusing. That what do you do if a food is high in protein, but also high in fat, but also high in vitamin A, but low in vitamin C, but medium in sodium. You know, you kind of juggle all these variables to figure out, should I buy it or shouldn't I?
I generally look at the calories and the cholesterol.
And I think that's typical. That you look at that. Some people look at sodium. Some look at
no, but I mean,
saturated
I guess
fat.
it depends on the thing I'm. What do you think is the single most important piece of information a person should look at on a food label?
Depends on the food. So a lot of foods, saturated fat and trans fat are really important. Fiber. If food, we need fiber, and they reflect the presence of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans. So if there is no fiber in those kinds of foods, I'd put it down.
Do you think they rig it a little bit on the portions? That, you know, you get the package and you go, wow, this has only got like 15 calories of fat. And then you go and look at the portion and it's like 1/4 of one cookie.
That's right.
I mean, are you okay with that? Or would there be another way of approaching that?
No, I think many of the foods have reasonable servings, some don't. And the FDA should change those. But it's such an ordeal for the FDA to do anything, for political reasons and also funding. The FDA is 20% smaller than it was 5 years ago. You know, it's astonishing. Probably about the same size as it was 20 years ago. It doesn't have the people to deal with all these problems.
But is it not like even say the USDA? That there's like some people argue that the whole food safety component should be taken out of the USDA and made its own agency. Are there components of the FDA that should become a separate agency?
The food division of the FDA should be taken out and ideally combined with the food safety division of the Department of Agriculture.
Should we just have a Department of Food?
Or something, like EPA is a separate entity. This should be a Food Safety Administration that would do all the food safety and nutrition work. There's even some at the Commerce Department. They deal with some seafood issues. The Treasury Department deals with $100 billion a year worth of alcoholic beverages. What are the acceptable ingredients, how they should be labeled,
and that's
so
in
on.
Treasury, which
Treasury.
again,
it doesn't make sense.
Well,
you know, they do the tax collections.
It's all from the Dark Ages.
Yeah, because they do tax collections. It should all be combined. It probably won't be combined for a very long time because of congressional fiefdoms.
There's you know, we had to have Homeland Security, I suppose, and so that's our last big creation of an agency, and people usually repulse at the notion of yet another bureaucracy. But your point is made not just by you. It's made when you do the research. You see a lot of people wondering why certain components of food are where they are, and that they're not brought together. But could you not, like, make this a last great cause? You know, I mean, I don't know how many more years you plan to work at CSPI, but wouldn't that be something to take on to create this agency?
We work on it a lot. We're working with Senator Durbin and Congresswoman DeLauro. They have legislation that would do that. But the FDA is part of HHS. They have their congressional committees. USDA has its congressional committees. Neither wants to give up that authority. The likelier thing, the quicker thing to do would be to pull the food division out of the FDA and have a federal food administration, maybe still part of HHS. The food part of FDA is a stepchild to the drug and medical devices area. That's where the excitement is. That the commissioners are always excited about drugs. They're going to save lives, not realizing they could save as many lives on the food side. But that's old-fashioned. You know, it's Betty Crocker, Julia Childs kind of stuff. The excitement is on drugs. So, and the current commissioner has had no interest on the food supply, on the food.
Speaking of drugs, though this isn't a drug, what did you make of the airborne controversy?
Everybody know what airborne is? It says phony dietary supplements.
Phony according to you. Well.
Zinc and vitamin C.
I mean, it is made of something.
That's right.
It is made of real things.
That's right. It's a real thing.
That
but the claims are phony.
It claims
to be a cure and a preventative measure for colds.
Right.
And the company sells $300 million worth of this stuff a year.
Oh, it's a phenomenal success story. Yeah.